My name is Nova Calder. I am 31 years old and I live in Harborview, Pacific Crest, a place where the water glitters like a stubborn secret and the days move slow enough to hear your own heartbeat when you walk along the pier. I am a graphic designer, the kind who keeps a steady hand on a tablet and a steady eye on the clock, because deadlines do not care about feelings and a good layout can feel like a small miracle on a tired afternoon. My girlfriend, Lena, and I had built a life that felt honest in its smallness. A shared apartment with a view of the waves that slapped the seawall like a patient drummer. A routine that was never flashy, but it was ours. We cooked together on Sundays, the kitchen smelling of garlic and lemon, and we talked about future plans in careful, careful tones, the way two people would talk about a house with a yard and a dog or a trip to a city neither of us had seen, but both of us wanted to explore. Lena was the kind of person who remembered the smallest details about my day, the way I took my coffee, the way I preferred my playlists to be quiet in the morning, the way I sometimes drifted when I was tired and needed a reminder that I was still here. People called us a stable couple, and for a long while I believed that we were, or at least I wanted to believe it so much that I did not notice the creeping signs that maybe something was not quite right. The signs were small at first, the kind you brush off as tiredness or stress. Lena started staying late at the office more than once a week, excuses piling up like notebooks that never get finished. I told myself she was chasing a project, that the work was demanding, that it was not personal. Then the messages began to appear in the open spaces of her phone, the kind that you do not expect to read, the kind that make your breath catch and your hands shake. I had never taken her for a secret keeper, not in a way that would matter, but the messages hinted at something private and complicated, something she did not want me to see and perhaps did not know how to tell me. I found myself sitting with a cup of tea in the small hours, scrolling through screens that felt too intimate to touch, and I felt a hollow drop in my chest that I tried to fill with logic and patience. Lena would smile at me in the mornings, kiss my cheek, tell me she loved me in a voice that sounded like a quiet weather report, and yet there were moments when she looked at me with a distance I did not recognize, as if I were a memory she carried in her pocket rather than a person standing in the room with her. Then the truth crashed into my small harbor of certainty with the force of a storm. I did not need a confession from her to know what was happening, because the truth stood in the margins of our life and refused to stay hidden. I walked into the living room one evening, the lamps low and the city noises a soft murmur through the window, and I saw the way Lena stood too close to a coworker, a man I had seen around the office, a person I had never had a reason to notice before. The moment stretched and broke in a million tiny shards of realization, and I felt the room tilt, and the words I forced myself to say came out uneven and sharp. I told Lena what I had found and what it meant, told her that this was not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not something we could walk away from as if it were a minor miscommunication. She did not cry. She did not defend or blame me outright. She gave me a look that asked me to understand something I did not want to admit, that perhaps she did not want our life as much as I did, perhaps our room felt suffocating to her, perhaps what she wanted could not be kept in the small space we shared. I packed my things that night, a careful collection of garments and books and the little things that had belonged to us. The mug that never stayed on its coaster, the blanket with the frayed edge, the photo of the two of us on a rainy day. I did not leave a note, not because I did not want to talk to Lena, but because I had learned after too many small hints that sometimes words are not enough. The morning after I left, I went to a friend's place and slept on an old couch that smelled of rain and dust, and in the morning I stood on the balcony of that small apartment and listened to the harbor wake up with a stubborn patience I had not known I could envy. Lena tried to reach me, a handful of calls and several messages that I did not read, and then she ceased. I blocked her channels to protect a little seed of peace that was growing inside me at last. The next morning I went to work, the routine of the office a pale echo of what it had been. The coworker from the other side of the room, the one I had known only as a name on a ticket and a face in a hallway, had his own version of the storm. He came to me with a calm that felt almost rehearsed, a smile that did not touch his eyes, and he told me that Lena and he were involved and that this was not something to apologize for, that he liked Lena and she liked him back, that they could perhaps be honest about what they wanted. I wanted to punch him, to shake him until his calm cracked and fear leaked out. I did not do that in the middle of the office, where the day carried on like a ship that would not sink no matter how heavy the water got. Instead, I told him that he could have her if that was what he wanted, and that I would be speaking to human resources, because I believed the rules of the place would demand a clean separation of work and personal life. And I did not want any unfair advantage or awkward tension to bleed into the days that followed. Derek, the coworker, was a creature of pride and clever excuses, a man who believed that small lies could be dressed up as cleverness, and that those who caught him were too slow to understand the game. He tried to minimize what happened. He tried to pretend that what existed between Lena and him was a natural consequence of friendly flirting that had somehow grown too far, and he offered the kind of apology that sounded like a rehearsal line, the sort you give when you know you have been caught, but want to spare yourself the larger consequence of real truth. Lena, for her part, did not show up with a flood of tears or a long explanation. She did not claim she was a victim or demand pity. She told me something I did not want to admit to myself, that she did not feel the same for our life any longer, that she needed something else, someone else perhaps, and that perhaps we had reached the end of a road we had pretended would stay open forever. The words came out warning and exhausted, and they left me with a silence that felt like the coldest room I had ever stood in. The days after were a strange blend of routine and upheaval. The company moved Derek to a different team, and for me, that small act became a line drawn in the sand. We would not share projects or meetings anymore, not the kind of closeness that had once suggested collaboration could bloom into something peaceful. The relief of distance was real, but so was the ache of being watched by the same people who had watched Lena and me for years. I moved into a small studio apartment that I could call mine alone, a place with a window that allowed the morning sun to push its way in, and a door that could close behind me without the echo of a voice that used to echo through the heart of the home we shared. The rent was low, the space was modest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the word mine moving through me with something close to pride. I began to collect simple objects that reminded me of who I was and what I cared about outside of another person, and I spent days with a pencil and a sketchbook trying to relearn the shape of my own desires, and not the borrowed ones I had carried for so long. The healing, as it tends to do, came in when I stopped waiting for forgiveness that would never arrive and started building a routine that could hold me up. I threw myself into work and into small acts of care for my own body and mind. Long walks along the pier on days when the air tasted of salt and patience, a morning yoga class that reminded me to breathe, evenings spent at my desk rewriting a portfolio that had grown old with me, a little side project that turned into a real dream when a local cafe asked if I could design their new posters. The project inside me began to glow with independent light, a thing I could call my own without apology. I learned to stand up for myself in meetings, to name my needs and limits, and to refuse the quiet, smiling pressure from others that a betrayed heart could still be a problem for everyone else to fix. I found a small circle of people who had gone through their own storms, neighbors I started meeting at the post office and in the shared garden behind my building, people who listened without judgment and offered practical advice instead of sympathy that sat too heavy on the lungs. The turning point did not come as a thunderclap. It came as a moment in which I decided to throw out the old script and tell my own truth in the simplest way possible. I stood in the office break room, a place that had become a kind of stage for the worst and the best of the day, and I told Lena that I would not pretend to be okay with a life that no longer included my dreams as a constant. I told her that I hoped she would find what she was looking for, that I hoped she would be honest with herself, and that I hoped she would not keep twisting the truth to fit a version of how we had loved. It was not a dramatic scene filled with shouting and public confrontation, but a quiet, careful moment in which I asked for what was mine, which was honesty and space, which was a chance to move forward without being drawn back into a past that did not serve either of us anymore. Lena listened with a face that would have looked blank on any ordinary day, but on that day, it carried the weight of someone who finally understood that endings can arrive with the gentlest of rituals, not the loudest of apologies. The last pieces of the old life fell away in a way that felt almost ceremonial. Derek was transferred to another branch, a move that felt like a mercy to me, and perhaps to him too, a way to erase the daily proximity that had turned into a poison between us. My own apartment, though small, became a sanctuary. I signed a lease for a studio under a striped awning in a quieter corner of Harborview, near a bookstore where the shelves held old novels and new ideas, near a little cafe where the barista knew my order without asking, near a park where I could walk and think and breathe. The act of making a new space for myself felt like constructing a shelter from a storm that had already spent its fury. I focused on work, yes, but I also vowed to spend time on what I loved outside of work. Painting, handwritten letters to friends I had not written to in a while, and a small community project I started with a neighbor who ran a youth program for art lovers under the age of 15. I found that the more I built my life with intention, the less the old ache crowded in and demanded attention. There were moments when the old pain flaunted itself, when I would wake in the night and picture Lena and Derek together, and a kind of old rage would wake up in me, a heat that could have burned its own path through my chest. In those moments, I reminded myself of what the storm had taught me. When love betrays you, you do not become a worse person because you were hurt. You become someone who speaks your truth more clearly and acts on it with courage. The old fear that I might never find someone who could truly see me began to shrink, replaced by the slow, stubborn confidence that I could find a life that would honor who I was before the heartbreak and who I could become after it. The truth that finally found its way into my days was not a fancy, dramatic reconciliation with the world. It was a simple, stubborn commitment to myself, a decision that the next chapter of my life would be written by my own hands rather than by the broken faith of others. And then, as if the harbor itself was listening to my new rhythm, there came a small but bright surprise. It did not arrive as a thunderbolt or a grand gesture, but as a gradual, gentle drift of new people into my life. A new neighbor moved in 2 doors down, a woman named Myra who ran a tiny climbing gym in the same block where I rented the studio. She had a way of listening that did not demand that I fill the air with feelings I could not name yet, and she asked thoughtful questions about my art and my plans rather than the old questions about what went wrong. We began to spend evenings sharing coffee and bread and the stories of our days, and with her, I learned that friendship could be a kind of healing that did not erase the pain, but made it easier to bear. Not all days were easy, and not every conversation was a victory, but the new normal grew into something steady and kind, like the harbor we lived beside that never truly stopped breathing in and out. Looking back, I see that my life was pushed toward a kind of strength I did not know I possessed before. The betrayal did not disappear, and the memory of Lena and the room we shared did not vanish, but the way I stood up after the fall became a new compass. The old plan we had once thought would define us faded away, and in its place rose smaller, more intimate dreams. To build a small design studio that could support local artists, to mentor a teen who loved to draw but did not have a clear path, to stand up for the things I believed in at work without fear of losing what I had earned by sheer persistence. I learned to set boundaries and to protect the quiet hours that were mine to keep. I learned to forgive in a way that helped me release the heavy weight of blame without pretending that the hurt did not matter. And I found that even in a city full of strangers, there could be rooms where you are seen for who you really are, and where you can finally breathe a little easier because someone respects your need for a life that does not hinge on another person's decisions. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this: trust is a delicate thing, something you must guard and nurture, but it is not a wall that you must seal off your heart behind. Trust can be rebuilt, but it begins inside you, in the daily choices you make to love yourself enough to be honest when your own life starts to crumble. I did not seek revenge in the old sense, the kind that aims to wound in return. Instead, I pursued a revenge that was nothing like revenge at all, a transformation of my own reality. I reclaimed the space I had given away, I rebuilt my story on a foundation of honesty and care, and I allowed myself the right to be happy again, not through someone else's forgiveness or memory, but through the simple, stubborn act of choosing to stay true to what I wanted and needed. So now I tell you this not as a tale of victory and glory, but as a witness to a slow, steady recovery. I am Nova Calder, I am 31, I am a person who loves the sound of rain on a window and the feel of a new canvas under my fingers, who walks along the harbor with a mind full of plans and a heart that is learning to trust again, not as a naive faith, but as a practiced courage. My life has taken a turn I did not expect, the kind that arrives after a storm when the air feels softer and the world seems to lean in a little closer, inviting you to begin again with the knowledge that you did not break, You merely learned how to bend and come back straighter. If someone asks if I would change what happened, I would say maybe I would not choose the same pain again, but I would choose the same act of choosing myself, again and again, because that is how one learns to survive and perhaps even to thrive. And in Harborview, where the water runs quiet and true beneath the rain, I stand a little taller, not taller than my pain, but taller than the fear that used to keep me small. And I begin to believe that the life I want is still possible, if I am willing to build it with patient hands and a steadfast heart.